There was definitely positive things about her. I mean, I liked her. I actually got to like her quite a lot. I mean, I related with her as well, but I also, from the very start of the film, she came across as strong, outspoken, not afraid to speak her mind and get her voice heard. She wasn't cowed by the guys around her as well, which at that time would have been quite difficult to, her voice was very much heard. She was passionate. She was strong, or at least outwardly she seemed that way. And she wasn't afraid to, she wasn't afraid to tangle with the guys the men in her business who were the overlords as such.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Trolling with Logic, the podcast where we bring the hammer down on ignorance, unreason, and superstition on a bi-weekly basis with the occasional review of movies that are actually good. I'm your host, Nathan Dickey, and joining me as always is Cal.
Hi there, it's good to be here.
And Jen.
Hey, what's that?
Yeah, Kitch seems to be a rarity these days for some reason.
He's in Singapore. That's partly to do with the time differences. It's all weird now with him.
Yeah, that explains it. Well, on this episode, we're reviewing a biographical drama movie called Christine. This film, which premiered at the 2016 Sundance Film Festival, is based on the true story of Christine Chubbuck, a 29-year-old broadcast news reporter who put a gun to her head and committed suicide on live television in July 1974. She was a reporter for WXLT TV, an ABC affiliate station in Sarasota, Florida. And the film we're talking about kind of chronicles her downward spiral and her eventual end. And the tagline that we use on the website for this show is, or part of the tagline is, movie reviews to make your head explode. And now it's kind of getting a little bit too literal.
Yes, it is. It seems a bit in bad taste with this. Also to say, I think this is the first time we've ever reviewed a complete, like a standard movie on this show as such. Yeah, like just
a decent one. Like a properly decent
yeah, but
one.
more like kind of a more kind of mainstream. Like a lot of the films we've reviewed in the past tend to be very obscure, maybe propaganda-ish, bad documents. So this is the first one that's actually proper mainstream with legitimate actors, and it's been made to be a proper movie as such.
And it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was Lundy that switched me onto this, and then it was at the end of the show last week we switched it on, and it seems to have, we're on a roll now reviewing movies kind of related to the subjects which are in this. I just want to say first off was technically this film is really good because it captures the mid-70s perfectly, like not just the costumes but the way the film's edited. It's it's paced just like an old 70s movie, because that's a problem I find with movies that are trying to capture a past decade. They seem to
Is it exactly as you remember it?
Yeah, not quite. But no, if you just say, just go watch any movie from the 70s. Like the other night, I think Logan's Run was on TV, and that's, you notice the editing, it's a lot slower paced editing in 70s movies compared to today, where the cuts are just hyper fast all the time. And this one's done like that, and I think it's even the way they speak and just the whole atmosphere. It feels like it was actually captured on film and not on a 4K camera. So I really applaud them for that. They captured the sort of mood and feeling of a 70s movie perfectly, which is ideal for this subject as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my technical take. And I suppose like the movie itself, it touches on quite a broad range of subjects, as you noted, Nathan. There's depression. There was, the fact that this Christine was forced to basically forgo her professional integrity. And I think that's, as you've said, Nathan, that's something maybe a lot of people in media and journalism come face to face with at some point in their career.
Yeah, there's the problem of trying to stay true to your principles while also trying to meet the demands of ratings. And that creates cognitive dissonance Christine's story kind of captures that perfectly with she covered mainly human interest stories from the local community and kind of the heartwarming she covered heartwarming local stories that had a human interest angle to it, and her boss was always pestering her to produce stuff that was grittier and that would raise the ratings. And he even used the famous line or the famous motto. It's not a motto. It's a dictum that if it bleeds, it leads. And she had ambitions to advance her career, and she understood that she had to move away from the kind of stories she was good at doing to meet the demands of her boss and the demands that come with being a broadcast news reporter when gritty, bloody stories are what sells.
And at the very beginning of the film as well, one of the lines that I picked up on was him berating her being a feminist, and that he thought that she thought that if she just shouted loud enough, she'd get what she wanted, which was quite a kind of sexist in one way, but also authoritarian view of what she should be doing. He thought that because he'd invested in the news business, everything should go according to his whims. And it was a bit weird. I wouldn't want to work under somebody like that, but I actually do, kind of.
Right.
So.
But I think in most people's lives, they do come to a point with that with their professional lives where they're forced to, do you do the thing you're passionate about that maybe isn't going to get you as noticed as much, or do you forgo your principles to push ahead and go for the more glamorous kind of work?
It all depends on what you want to get out of it in the end, doesn't it? If you want to get a good warm feeling of satisfaction that you've done something that you're proud of, then great. But unfortunately, as it was shown very well in this film, if you just go and do your own thing, do what you like, you probably just get left behind, or you might even get fired. You might lose your job because what you want to do isn't what they want to do. If you don't go with the flow, you get washed up on the bank. That's what it is.
Because there definitely was that, because the whole thing with Christine Chubbuck was she did suffer quite severe depression, and there was all these different factors that played into it. That was one of the major ones, her professional life. And you kind of always wonder, had she stayed around, how would she have coped in kind of what's network news? I think it's really about the 80s, Nathan, isn't it? That kind of 24-hour news kicked in, and the need to everything in quick sound bites. You always wonder, had she not done what she did, would she have been able to cope in that environment anyway?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like I said, it's one to ponder and all that, because it's like I said, it's a very tragic, and like I said, the depression, and there was all these other factors overriding it, and the other one was she felt in other aspects of her life she was a failure. The most notable one was that she felt she was 29 and she hadn't married and had children, and that was an overriding thing. And that was, I don't know my history of the feminist movement so much, but I think it was kind of starting to change at that point, wasn't it, where a woman just wasn't defined by being married and having a whole lot of kids, wasn't it? I don't know. Nathan, you might know
She had big issues as well, though, didn't she? Because she was so naive, because she hadn't had any experience in terms of sexual partners or anything like that. So when she came into this situation that she suddenly had to make a life decision about whether she wanted children then and there, all of a sudden that kind of desperation hit her hard, because she had no experience at all. Despite her mum being kind of this hippie character who was all about, free love, etc., from the swinging 60s and all that.
The real life Christine Chubbuck dealt with depression most of her life, and based on what her family and friends told people, interviewers and psychiatrists and whatnot, her depression seemed to center around her lack of ability to enter into relationships, whether romantic or interpersonal of any kind, really.
Because there is that, like when you read through the history, like some of the surviving co-workers did say, like she was a wonderful person, but she was quite difficult to get on with. And that wasn't in that she was aggressive or anything like that. She just wasn't very socially attuned and all that. She just couldn't form proper connections with folk, which is quite strange when you think of how her stories were all about that kind of thing in a way.
Yeah, she was quite outspoken, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was given her own AM talk show on the station called Sundance Digest, and it was her boss, the director at the station, who gave her that show, and they wanted her to focus on like the lost segments of society, as one news article writer put it, like the alcoholics and drug users and people who are down and out. Those were the stories they wanted her to cover, and those were the kind of guests she had on her show. And that wasn't reflected as much as it could have been in this movie, but that's what happened in real life. And with depression and working in a demanding industry like news broadcasting, I think there is the potential to lose grasp on yourself.
Yeah, because we're also talking about in the 70s when, there's no polite way of putting it, that the attitudes towards mental health were fucking atrocious then. I mean, there is parts in the film where it's almost like that you do get some, maybe the older generation now, they say, oh, well, just stop being depressed, cheer up and you'll be fine. Because she does go for treatment and that, and it shows you how bad the treatment was at the time for mental illnesses and depression in general.
And also that, what was that group all about? That her love interest, or the guy who didn't reciprocate affection, took her to in his old school. This, what was that? What did they say? Yes, but, or something like that. There's this idea that they would be given a statement and then they had to respond and say yes, but, and give their excuse. And then there was another response to that to kind of elicit a change in the way they were thinking. And it didn't seem to work very well for her, did it? I think it was the last push.
I think it was probably, I'm not sure what that specific method is called in therapy, but it sounds like, I don't know if it'd be accurate to call it pop therapy, but it seems like one of these kind of fad treatments that come and go. From what I could tell, that method or technique only kind of serves to reinforce your own negative views of yourself, because the way the game is set up is you're supposed to say yes, but, and come up with a new rationalization for why you're in a hopeless situation and why you can't fix it.
And then the other person's meant to sort of quit back and make it seem as if it's so easy to sort out because they don't have the same issue. I suppose in a way it's trying to get you to see things from someone else's perspective, but to me it did seem very counterproductive. And well, the film at least made it look as if that, plus added to the fact that she thought that she was on a date with a guy that she would finally be able to have that child with that she so desperately needed, was the final nail in her coffin, really.
That, and the fact that her love interest seemed to show interest in her, but then it was revealed that he was actually with her rival, the sports reporter, Andrea, and that he had asked her to go to Baltimore with him when the executive, the big boss, came and was looking to poach some of the reporters to bring with him to Baltimore. And she wanted that very bad, like everybody else did. But she had this view of herself that she didn't measure up, and that negative view of herself was reinforced by her boss and her boss's negative remarks on her work, even when she tried to do what he wanted her to do.
But that's one of the problems when that's something I could really relate to, because if you have a negative view of yourself, then somebody else, but you're desperately trying to live up to somebody else's expectations. Sometimes you try too hard and that's visible. And also, of course, the stress that you then exude at that particular point also acts as a warning sign to other people. So although you think you're trying very, very hard, those warning signs are big red flags to other people. So she was actually doing everything wrong. She was doing everything to make herself look unstable when she thought she was actually going to plan. And it's so relatable, but horrible to watch. I found it really, really difficult to watch that because I could really relate to that from my past.
I mean, yeah, that's one thing. I think this movie, I think it is, if you either suffer from depression or you know someone who's got, I think it's quite an eye-opening film. And it's a very relatable one because it treats the subject. It's probably the best film I've seen which deals with the subject. I don't think there's, because it is just, it's very relatable to those, and it kind of does it in a way that's understandable to maybe those who haven't had experience of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are very few films that tackle the depression very well. But what I mean, there's one that I think of off the top of my head, Christian Bale film, The Mechanic. Is it The Mechanic or The Machinist? Sorry. And I thought that was good. And that kind of touched on a few different parts of it, regret, depression, etc. But yeah, this felt very... I don't know if anybody who's not suffered from depression would be able to relate what's going on. I think some people would perhaps just see it as, she's gone off the rails, she became crazy and she shot herself in the head. But I'd be interested to hear people's comments on it and whether they, if they haven't suffered from depression, could understand what was going through their mind.
Yeah, well,
I think a lot of films that deal with depression tend to other the person who's being portrayed as going through depression, and I think that's one thing this film does differently and does right. It doesn't remove the humanity from the person. It doesn't other the person. In this case, Christine Chubbuck. Yeah,
because I want to say probably in a lot of films when they deal with mental illness, they always have to portray the person as basically being barely able to function. And in this one, she's going through her life. She's getting through. And that's what a lot of people who do suffer from depression. They say they put on the face just to get through the day, but then they go home and then they just don't want to do anything the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's something that was really good about the scenes that, the difference in personality between the person that she was in public and at work compared with how she was around her mum. And that's something I think everybody can relate to. The way you are around your siblings and your parents is always very different because you're used to them in a different kind of way than you are with your colleagues. You're not trying to impress them. You're not trying to pretend. And that came across very, very clearly in this. So there's one part where she's almost like a child. Her mum comes into her room, or she walks through the living room, I think, and her mum's been smoking weed. And she goes upstairs and she sort of complains to her mum, who's been living with her, and, Christine's been paying the rent, etc. So she's almost mothering her mum. And there's this really interesting dynamic between them that I think a lot of people can relate to, where you can tell it's family, and you can tell that Christine isn't so bothered about, hiding her flaws. And that was quite intense.
Because there's also the thing is how in the weeks beforehand when she did that piece on suicide, which was kind of, it's like a great thing, hindsight and all that.
Yeah.
When what was it again? Because I haven't seen this film in a few weeks now. I think, Jen, you just watched it minutes ago.
Yeah.
What was it? She wanted to do a piece on suicide, and she actually asked the police officer what's the best way to do it, didn't she?
I don't recall that, but I might have actually been packing boxes at that point. I remember that she got herself a police scanner. I don't know if that's got anything to do with it. And then she heard about the place, the car mechanic who was dealing in swapped guns or something like that. And that's where she picked up her gun from very early on in the film.
It wasn't covered as well or explained as fully in the movie, but in the real life story, she asked the station's news director for permission to do a piece on suicide 3 weeks prior to her death, and her suggestion was approved, and that's why she visited the local sheriff's department to talk with an officer about the most effective methods people have used for suicide. And I think that's the genesis of the ideation or the idea in her head.
Yeah, and she is that the old guy at the police station that she talks to, the chief, and then he's like, I like what you're doing. I like the positive stories that you're doing. And because she goes in there and she's starting to talk about, she wants to know about the darker side of it. She wants to understand the dark stories that they've got, and has the crime rate gone up, etc. And he goes, stick to the positive stuff. I really like that. I really like the way you get involved with people. And she's kind of slightly taken aback by that because she's been told to get the hard stuff. She's been told to get the blood and the guts.
Yeah, because in the film there was the other bit which I read in the kind of the notes you read about Christine online is that the week before she had a joke with someone who worked at the station that she was going to kill herself on air.
Yes.
When she got in a gun. Is that covered in the film?
It isn't. A week before she killed herself, she was talking to one of the news editors, the one who covers the nightly news, and she told him that she bought a gun and joked about killing herself on air. And Rob Smith, the guy she was talking to, later stated in an interview that he didn't respond to that. He thought it was just a sick joke. He tried to change the subject. Because Christine, according to a lot of the accounts I've read online, had a really dark sense of humor that a lot of her coworkers and friends kind of just brushed off and didn't take seriously. They didn't see it as a sign of anything, but she was constantly poking fun at herself and criticizing herself in this darkly humorous way. And this is something that had been going on since she was a child, because I read that while she was in grade school, she started kind of a tongue-in-cheek group with her friends. They call themselves the Dateless Wonders Knitting Club. Okay. And throughout her life, she referred to herself as dateless or undateable because she never went on more than 2 dates with a single guy. And she was worried about the fact that she had never experienced sexual intimacy, and she was approaching her 30th birthday. Yeah, and there was also that she had one of her ovaries removed, if I remember right. Yes, was it a tumor or? Yeah, and I think it was that or an ovarian cyst, and I think that weighed on her, that she desperately wanted children, and then with that, it didn't make it impossible, but it was going to be very, very difficult for her to conceive. Yeah, she had to conceive within, what was the time frame for that? Yeah. Yeah, she had 2 or 3 years to get pregnant. And then they said if she didn't do that, then it'd be next to impossible. Yep. And yes, and that kind of, like with her desperation to have a child, that's probably compounded her depression a hell of a lot more. And that was something to do with the times as well. The early 70s, there was a lot of social pressure for women to fit into this mold of mother and caretaker. And she was alienated as it is, or even as she was alienated, even in her personality and the way she related to people, let alone the ability to fit into this specific mold that society thought she needed to fit into. Yeah, and probably in her own mind with what's happened to her, in her capacity to be a biological mother, she probably in her own mind saw that's kosher would happen to me, that's just, I'm defective. Kind of that really kind of compounded on it. Mm-hmm. And I think being a news reporter, there's always the potential that you'll internalize the kinds of stories you'll cover, and also internalize the kinds of stories you're supposed to cover. So she talked to a lot of down and out people who had a lot of bad luck in life, and she also, interspersed with that, she also talked to just normal everyday people doing interesting things in the local community. And so on the one hand, she was talking to people who were down and out in life, had a lot of bad luck, and on the other, she was talking to normal people who were respected in the community, and she could see herself in the former and not so much in the latter. And then with this demand that comes down that she cover and provide grittier, bloodier stories, I think her search for that side of news reporting alienated her further. You could see her kind of lose touch with herself, maybe listening to the police scanner. There's one thing I want to go back to, and this is a word I've heard, and I know you've probably got a bit more now, but I hear this word, a suicidal ideation. So what exactly is an ideation, the suicidal ideation? Suicidal ideation is actually extremely common. Most people have had it, and basically all it is the idea, you have the idea in your head to commit suicide. And a large portion of the population goes through suicidal ideation. It's almost normal to, but a very few percentage actually follow through.
Yeah, because I've always wondered whether it was like if it was a difference between someone who seriously thinks about it and then those who maybe, I don't know, almost in a joking way or something like that. Or those who just, like I say, they watch a film like Christine and they imagine themselves in it. So it is just the thought of killing yourself just in general, is it?
It's not just the thought of it. Like you can imagine yourself in Christine's shoes and imagine yourself going through with it, but that doesn't really count as ideation. Ideation is having the thought of doing it to yourself seriously, but not necessarily going through with it. And very few people who have suicidal ideation actually go through with it, because the percentage of the population who do commit suicide is far, far lower than the percentage of people who do have suicidal ideation, which again is extremely common.
So it's like, just to say if you have a bad day at work and you're walking over the bridge and you look over and just say, oh, it'd be so much easier just if I jumped right now.
But then you think, oh shit, well, drowning, actually I can swim quite well. I'll panic when I get down there. It'll be really cold. I'll get stuck in the mud at the bottom.
Yeah, or just within a minute, you're just dismissing it and walking along. That kind of thing, is it, Nathan?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's always been, I always thought it was like when it's at the level where it's a very real possibility you might do it, but it's just that you think about it as an option almost for a second, then either you dismiss it or it lingers for a while.
Yeah, and it's my understanding also that the majority of suicides actually aren't planned out in any kind of detail. Most people who draw out elaborate plans usually fail or don't end up going through with it for some other reason. Yeah,
they think of it. They basically think it too hard.
I only ever planned one of my suicide. I only ever planned one of my suicide attempts, but that was the one that actually got me into hospital, because that was the plan was the simplest cop-out you could ever think of, which was just take lots and lots of different kinds of pills. And that kind of counts as planning, because I had to go and buy them first, etc., etc. So.
But it's like, I think it's more, I don't know, are you guys aware of the Netflix series 13 Reasons Why?
No.
I've been meaning to watch that.
Yeah, it's like what Nathan's saying there. In that one, the protagonist of the story is a girl who commits suicide and she leaves behind, and it's a whole long, intricate plan. And I think like what you're saying, Nathan, is in reality, she probably would have, after having thought everything through so much and gone to all that effort, the chances of her actually following through would have kind of gone down dramatically over time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, over time, and depending on how detailed the plan was, but it does happen.
Yeah, there's always going to be the odd one, but just taking that as a general, because like in 13 Reasons Why, it's extremely intricate what she comes up with. But there's also like speaking of the suicide, you're aware of Nathan, I know you've spoken about this, the guy Kevin Hines who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived.
Yep, yeah, he actually visited my university and gave a talk there.
Yeah, like I said, if you're listening to this show, I think go out and check his story, and also read his book, because I read this book, I think it's Damaged But Not Broken. Sorry if I'm getting the name wrong, but it's definitely worth a read about what he went through and how his feelings and all that, because I think he has, it's not schizophrenia, I think he suffers severe bipolar and mania, I think that's what he has. But yeah, like I said, that's another good insight into what goes through the mind and the planning of that. And that was just one day he woke up and he just thought, I have to do this.
Yeah, well, when I worked with Northwest Service Academy back in 2008, working with the Forest Service to do various projects around the Pacific Northwest wilderness area, one of the girls I worked with took some time off because a friend of her family committed suicide at the age of 55, and in his personal belongings, they found a note. One of his notebooks that he kept since he was 19 or 20, and he had been planning on killing himself on a specific day at age 55 since he was 19 or 20, because he felt he wanted to be in control of his life and how and when it ended. So since he was around 20, he planned on killing himself 25 years later on a specific date, and he did follow through with it.
Sorry, I zoned out a bit there. I was thinking about my friend who killed himself last year, and it's, suicide is a difficult subject for a lot of people to talk about, and it always brings up a lot of emotion, especially if you've got a personal connection to it, doesn't it? So, and
it's also like we were saying with Christine, it's just probably it's not. A lot of people have very knee-jerk reactions to it and don't really understand or comprehend it fully. Because I have heard, casual when they mention suicide, and people say, "Oh, they're taking the coward's way out" and all that, which is, nothing further from the truth, I think.
Well, I mean, there's nothing cowardly about suicide because you're ending your life. It's only cowardly if you think you're going to carry on afterwards in some sort of new form. Yeah. I think. I mean, if you believe that.
The main reason I don't think it's coward because you're trying to override the biggest and most overpowering instinct in your body. You're trying to and that takes a lot of willpower. A lot of your instincts to override them, but that's the main one driving us all is, I enjoy living and I want to keep it.
I think that can be quite easy to overcome though. Sometimes it only takes drugs. Yeah, sometimes it only takes drugs. The right kind of drugs can help you overcome that quite easily. It makes it very, very easy to take that step. If you take away the fear, then the rest is easy, really. It's just a mechanical action. And there are certain drugs that will alleviate that fear to the point where you might not even know you're actually going through with it. It feels almost like a dream. It feels like something, like you're playing a video game and you're just going to come back again after you do it. Once the fear is gone, the rest is easy. And the drugs are often a way of escaping from the responsibility of the thing that's actually causing you the problems in the first place that are causing the depression, that are causing you to want to get to that point that you kill yourself. So in that respect, I still have a feeling sometimes that it is a selfish act. I think that the most difficult thing to do sometimes is to actually engage with and deal with the main problem that is causing your depression, if it is a problem that's causing it. With most people I know, it is that there is issues that they could resolve that are a main cause or a catalyst for their depression. But then, of course, you have other people for whom it is, at least in their outward explanation of it, not something that they have a pinpoint on. They don't actually know what is causing it. They don't know what's. It's a difficult, it's a very difficult thing because once again, when you're talking about research into suicide and depression, etc., it always relies on that person feeling comfortable enough to be open about their deepest, darkest secrets. And that's what makes it so difficult sometimes, because even if you're speaking to a total stranger, like I was when I first realized my transsexualism when I was a kid, I still didn't feel comfortable telling them about that. It took me 10 years before I would tell anyone about the genuine reasons for my depression. I was trying to find every other reason that might be more acceptable societally and to other people, because even the people who were impartial, even the people who were there genuinely to help me, I couldn't tell them. And I can imagine the same thing happening. This is going to sound quite controversial, but I can imagine the same thing happening or worse if that person, for example, has a massively taboo, something that is so taboo or abhorrent, something, for example, like pedophilia. If somebody has attractions to children, but they are otherwise a good person and they're not acting on it, if somebody has an attraction to children, are they going to admit that to anybody? Is that even going to come up in a chat to their psychologist or their psychiatrist? That could be something that they carry with them to their death without anybody else knowing about. And it's the underlying cause of all their problems in their entire life. There are some really dark things that people have to deal with. And that, to me, especially in my experience with people who have killed themselves or suffer from depression, that is the main issue. That is the main problem, this inability to deal with your darkest, most societally unacceptable character traits, things that you just can't accept.
And that's why these kinds of things are hard to depict in film, because...
Yeah, very much so.
Because with Christine Chubbuck's case, nobody will ever know what really went on inside her head and what she was really dealing with. I mean, we can make guesses and educated guesses, but I think one way in which this film might have got it wrong even though nobody will really know, is it seemed to portray her depression as something that, well, the film put maybe too much emphasis on her situational aspect of her depression. So her depression was instigated by situations in her life, and you don't really get the sense that it was something that she was dealing with internally, something that was part of her nature or part of her personality, which a lot of depression is based on a person's situational place in life, but a lot of it isn't. It's kind of a mix of both. And somebody's situations and what they go through can intensify what's already there. And I don't know if this film really conveyed that as well as it could have.
No, it was quite cause and effect. You're right. So there was a lot of sort of pinpointing of things. Every scene seemed to focus on something that might have triggered her in some sort of a way. But you're right. There wasn't a lot of sort of in-depth emotional analysis of her as an individual. There wasn't her, writing in a diary more than the dice, which is that place that she had to go to get the gun, or that she went to get the gun. There was no real sort of inner monologue. There was no private information. There was just the outward depiction of her in a situational day-to-day. But in that respect, it is like seeing somebody else, isn't it? It's like seeing colleagues at work, and you don't know what's going through their head. You might see them unhappy, and then you say, "Is everything okay?" And they go, "Yes." But there's probably something going on that they just don't want to tell you. And it depicted it in that kind of a familiar way, which is quite good.
I think that's the thing they were trying to aim for, is this could be someone you work to next day, the brusque, kind of very self-deprecating individual. And they could be repressing all of this but it's just, how do you get people to open up at the end of the day? That's going to be always the biggest issue, because I know, Jen, you'll probably agree with me, in the UK, we're extremely reserved about being open to people.
Some people can be, as you know, I'm not, but most other people are, yeah.
But in general, in a workplace and that, we're not all group huggy and, letting all the tears come forth.
Yeah.
I don't know, is that the kind of workplace environment in America as well, Nathan?
I wouldn't know. Nowhere I've worked, but I'm sure there are some work environments that are like that.
Because it's probably just a little culture. We always, in the UK anyway, we always categorise Americans as being very loud and having no kind of internal monologues. I don't know.
I know the news industry here, both broadcast and print journalism, there's a real emphasis on not placing yourself or your emotions first, putting those on a back burner and being as objective as possible, and forgetting completely about yourself as you're writing a story or broadcasting a story. Don't become a subject in your own story.
But it's weird that your news pundits, like the individuals who present the news, they very much are the story. I mean, your Bill O'Reillys and your Cenk Uygurs and all of that. When they're on, they know that it's them. That's kind of it's not the issue. Yeah, we don't really get so much of that here in the UK. Maybe in the tabloid press, but on TV, on TV news here, that's very rare to see.
People like Cenk Uygur and Bill O'Reilly and the like are referred to as commentators, which is not the same thing as a journalist. So they're not considered journalists by the industry here. Like people at the Boston Globe or the New York Times or the Columbia School of Journalism, which is the most elite journalism school you can attend in the U.S., they wouldn't consider those people journalists, just commentators. But yeah, there does seem to be a trend, though, in American news of those presenting the news becoming personalities that entertain. Yeah,
sort of them being the story.
Yeah.
Like them taking the story and their viewpoint on the story as the story you're kind of now watching in a way. It's kind of like a meta thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like a bizarre kind of, like a narcissist makes everything about them. These news personalities, they're taking whatever story it is of the day and then they're making it about their viewpoint, and that's what you
Alex Jones.
Yeah. Well, it's not even news with Alex Jones. That's just, he just makes shit up. So.
Did you see that story about NASA and the children's colony on Mars?
Oh, yeah.
The planet
Yeah.
there. Boom. Oh,
Yeah, well,
dear.
that's
It's
the-
crazy. It's crazy. Like, just going off on a slight tangent here. It's crazy that somebody out there could think that you could kidnap children, stick them on a rocket without anyone know about, send them to Mars, and they're still children when they get there, even though they've been in flight 20 years, according to this guy. Brilliant logic. Love it.
But it's as like Dick Coughlin pointed out, it's been a few times this year that Alex Jones, he reports a story and then he does his shouting around, we're going to take them down, this is happening. And then 2 weeks later, we're very sorry, we didn't mean to say that. We were... Crikey, I'm getting Alex Jones' throat there when you do an impression of him. It's impossible. I think Dick Coughlin's the only one that can do that without kind of going into a coughing fit straight away.
One of these days, I'll put on my man voice and scare everybody.
Yeah, right. But is saying that, like, with the whole sticking on the suicide issue right now, do you think the internet is having the effect that some people make out?
What's that?
Like, just there's always the idea, like, social media pressure and all that.
I think they definitely
it's
can
having
be.
as big an effect as, like, a lot of scaremongers do?
I think there definitely can be an issue with, well, it's the last bastion of human interaction, isn't it? If you failed in real life and you're sat at home and the only thing you've got in front of you is a computer and you don't have any friends outside, you don't leave the house, the last place where you can have human interaction is on the internet. And if that fails, if you are bullied off the internet, if you have really bad interactions, if you do something that causes you shame, and the last place that you have any connection with people then has you as a laughing stock or anything like that, then that's the end, isn't it, really? That's the end for you. But also, alongside that, the internet gives you immediate access to the most horrific things that you would have had to pick up on a black VHS years ago. Like, if you had a black market VHS there's one my dad picked up called Killings. And I remember watching this. I remember watching it when I was a kid, and it's just a documentary about killings.
Executions, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite infamous, that.
Yeah. And my dad picked that up, and I watched that when I was, I don't think I was very old at all, maybe 11, 12. And watching a guy getting shot in the face over and over again by a firing squad. Now, that's tame on the internet. You've got people getting beheaded. You've got people getting run over by tanks or having mishaps when just the other day there was this story that these two kids who completely desensitized and thought that they could do this stunt with a Desert Eagle point blank at the chest through an encyclopedia, thinking the encyclopedia would block it. The internet in some ways kind of breeds idiocy, encourages it, and also delivers the most desensitizing garbage. So yeah, I definitely think it can have an impact. Big time.
Because the other impact I hear with some psychologists is what they're calling the highlight reel of life. Like you said, if you're not socially the best and Facebook's all you've got to see other folks' lives, and you go on there, you see pictures, they're all happy, everyone's happy out having a party, and it's, like I say, you're only seeing the briefest glimpse. You don't see them just, muddling through a day or, kind of missing their bills or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like,
that's an interesting phenomenon. That's a really interesting phenomenon, because what photography allows you to do, especially when it gets more and more high definition, is it allows you to see a scene how you would never see it if you were there in person. You would never see, for example, all the detail of all the different parts of the scene, of that single 1/5000th or 1/250 of a second, ever in real life. You would never see it. What photography, especially really, really high definition photography you get these days from camera phones and all that kind of stuff. You can check everything out. You can check the glimmer on somebody's sparkling ring. You can see the look in their eyes in that fraction of a second. You can see how clear their skin is and feel jealous about that, how perfectly their hair falls, the color of their iris, everything. You can see all of that and you take that all in. Whereas if you were seeing that person in person, you wouldn't make those same judgments because you see that in a completely different way. You're only looking at one aspect at a time. Your eye only has the ability to pick up a certain amount of information in that live scene. So whilst people think, if you're live, you have the smells and you have the sounds and everything else that goes with it, that makes up that experience. That's true, but that single image has far more impact on you in regards to making snap judgments, superficial judgments about people, than being there ever really would allow you to do. And that also can have a very deep impact, especially if you're the kind of person who has nothing and covets a lot. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, wasn't it?
No, it's all right. It's good. That's what we're here for, just to talk about these things.
But yeah, I love photography. I am a pixel peeper. I love looking at the detail. The detail is what I live for. But I don't like people in my photographs most of the time, unless that person is there for a specific reason. If it's one person in a scene, the scene itself has meaning. If you can build up meaning in a photograph, that itself can do something really good. And if you can build that detail in there of a nature scene, you can use that to your advantage. You can allow people to look at that image over and over again and actually build a story that's more positive through that photography.
And that's something I think Christine Chubbuck was good at, was infusing meaning in everyday occurrences, the things she covered on her AM talk show. And it's bringing out the best in people and like bringing light to the life that everybody was watching on their television screens. And the powers that be in her industry wanted something different from her. And that kind of resulted in, at least as far as depicted in the movie, that resulted in a change in her outlook on life, where she started looking for the worst in people and even kind of gloating in it, like the scene where she was interviewing the man who burned down his house because he slept with a cigarette in his hand.
3 times he said, didn't he?
Yeah. She found this dark pleasure in getting the story out of him and in posting it up for display. And that was because she was taking what she was told she was supposed to do and applying that to herself and making that her definition of success and how she's going to advance her career. But it ended up destroying a part of herself.
It was a very interesting scene, that, especially because when she took it back in, the criticism that she got is, why didn't you just take a film of the house burning down? And she was focusing on the person, focusing on that person's emotion. And all they wanted to see was the destruction. They wanted to see the fire. They wanted to see what was going on behind. And that's what you see in news a lot these days still, don't you? I mean, you get the snippets odd here and there of somebody who's a little bit outraged, but then you just see rolling coverage of a smoking building, like you did with Grenfell recently.
Yeah, you could see her trying to retain some of herself and what she was good at, which was telling other people's stories and in a personal, relatable way.
Yeah.
And she tried to bring that together with the grittier aspect that they wanted from her. And her boss just completely shot her down, even though she was very confident that he would love it. And that was a really emotionally pregnant scene, the shouting match between them.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And then kind of, I suppose we have to talk about the sort of like the climax of the film itself, because I think it was quite unusual what she did that day, wasn't it? She went into specifically asked to be the news anchor on that day when that wasn't her regular job, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then she kind of made amends, but she didn't do it on that particular day. She did it a couple of days beforehand for the weekend, wasn't it? And then she was like, she wanted to be on for the weekend. She came in, she said everything that she needed to do to sweeten him up, to allow her to get back in that position again, because her final, it was like a gotcha in a way, wasn't it? It was just like, I'm going to do exactly what you want. And then boom, she just did it live on air.
Yeah, because to make the scene, it was the morning report, wasn't it, Nathan, she did? Yeah. She went in that day and basically she read the news as normal, and I think it was a shooting, wasn't it? There was a shooting.
Yeah, there was a shooting at a restaurant at the local airport. And that's the story she was going to be talking about on air. But the film reel jammed. And the movie's not really clear on whether that film reel getting jammed was on purpose, whether she had an accomplice in her plan. That wasn't the case in real life in what really happened. But I think this movie kind of introduced some shades of gray there, where it made the viewer wonder, was the film reel operator an accomplice to this?
Well, I think more, she did intend to do this, and this just sort of opened up. It was like the perfect moment in her mind to do it.
Yeah.
When that went. And then just to let everyone know, she says, what is it, in keeping with the station's policy of bringing you the latest. So have you got the exact quote there? Yeah.
Yeah, she said, in keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts and in living color, you are going to see another first, attempted suicide.
Yeah, and then she pulled the gun and put it to her head. And is it the tapes of that? I think they're locked away somewhere. They have not been released at all.
There are stills, and that's about it.
There is, like I said, because I know no matter what we say, like people are going to go and search this, and they'll search on YouTube. And there is an alleged tape of it, and it's highly debated whether it's genuine or not.
I would be very skeptical.
Yeah, it's alleged to be a B-roll footage from one of the other cameras that day. And like one of the guys who worked in the studio, he's denied that the other camera was shooting any film. It was just a coverage camera. And there's like lots of debates on the videos themselves whether it's real or not.
Is that the one with where she's wearing a blue top and a necklace? And she's holding the gun, because there are stills online. If you do a search for Christine Chubbuck, there are those stills of her holding the pistol.
This tape that you see online, it's in black and white.
All right.
Like the sound quality is really bad, but a lot of people are saying, well, if this is someone trying to recreate it, this would be the perfect excuse for them to have it be really shitty audio.
Like the old UFO film.
Yeah. No, but basically saying that, like, it serves as an explanation either way, and that's why what they're debating over, like, it could be the tape has aged so badly and all these artifacts that come in, or it could be that these actors, to cover up their actress and her voice and all that they introduced these artifacts to cover it up. So I said it's hard, because I know people when they listen to this show, they're going to search for it anyway, and it'll come up. So yeah, I've seen it myself, and I don't know what to think of it myself. I said, no one from the station's actually come out to claim that it's genuine, so that kind of makes me more leaning towards it being staged.
That's why I haven't even searched for it, because I want to go straight to the source and not trust anything on the internet.
Yeah, but yeah, that's where the film ends, sadly, and it's the scene itself. It's
what I really liked about the scene is that it's really minimal. There's a minimalist take on it. It's not a big show of being bloody and gory.
Yeah, and this is kind of something I noticed. If this had been a more sort of conventional kind of Hollywood movie, you would have had the music building up, or you would have had like the police chief, oh, there's a gun missing, who could have taken it? And then he looks up at the TV, these kind of things. And here it's just presented very flat, and it's, there's almost kind of no build up to it when it happens. It just happens and that's it. And that's the best way to have done it. It's got a lot more impact that way, I feel. Yeah.
I thought that scene was handled really well, and didn't sensationalize it. Yeah,
because and it also, the reaction of everyone is what I believe the reaction would have been. They were all just in complete shock at what they in a conventional movie they would have all immediately started screaming and running around panicking, but they were all just, and the first word anyone says to her is, "Come on, stop joking," and that's when her body kind of keels over completely.
Well, apparently, from what I've read, most people who were watching locally at the time thought it was a stunt.
Yeah.
And they called into the station asking if it was a stunt.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't know if this is how it happened in real life, obviously, because the footage has been barred from everybody, and you wouldn't be able to see the reactions anyway. But in the movie, the reactions from the crew and people working there, they didn't react in any noticeable way at first for the first few seconds.
Yeah,
like her boss, even I think there's even a few seconds of the boss being depicted as, when she did it. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So when she shot herself in the movie, there's a scene, I think it cuts to her boss, and there's no reaction from him for the first few seconds or so, and it almost seems like the movie depicts it as he thinks she was pulling a stunt as well. I don't know. Did you get that impression?
Yeah, definitely. I know he even said something, didn't he? He even went, "Oh, come on, tell her to get up."
It's either quit
and
joking.
then they start screaming.
Yeah, I think it's quit joking or something like that. Like I said, there's someone says something like that, and then the body because she kind of falls on the desk first, and you hear someone say either quit kidding around or stop joking, and then boom, it hits the floor and the blood comes out, and then they start screaming.
Yeah.
But I think it's more just that is what people's reactions are in those moments. It's just utter, it's like your mind just blue screens because it's so bizarre what's just happened to you. So I think the reactions were actually very genuinely portrayed there. Because it's, that's one of their friends, and they can't really comprehend what they're seeing at first, and it's just that few seconds for it to register. And of course, the first thing you think is it's not real. She's, because she was known for her dark sense of humour, so they're wondering, is she pulling some weird stunt here? And, given resistance to showing the blood and gore, it kind of maybe fitted to them that this is kind of the stunt she would pull over this.
Yeah, this would be a good time to talk about, does this film do anything to portray Christine in a positive light? Because her brother, Tim, who's her only surviving member of her immediate family, when asked his reaction to this film by people interviewing him, he said he hadn't seen the film, but that he was critical of it anyway because he thought the movie would give people the sense or the impression that there's nothing really positive, or it wouldn't portray his sister in any positive light, or that viewers wouldn't take anything positive away from it, just the negative.
There was definitely positive things about her. I mean, I liked her. I actually got to like her quite a lot. I mean, I related with her as well, but I also, from the very start of the film, she came across as strong, outspoken, not afraid to speak her mind and get her voice heard. She wasn't cowed by the guys around her as well, which at that time would have been quite difficult to, her voice was very much heard. She was passionate, she was strong, or at least outwardly she seemed that way. And she wasn't afraid to, tangle with the guys the men in her business who were the overlords as such.
And that was, like I say, at a time when women in the workplace was still a big issue for a lot of guys. I mean, probably more like a bigger issue. And she stood up to them on that. And I didn't think portrayed her any negative. It just portrayed her honestly, I would say. That she was a strong person. She was like any other person, that they're flawed. And I've always said, like, if you make any movie, a biographical movie, and it's all positive, then that's the most unrealistic thing you can do, I think.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. It's also frustrating that being real, showing emotion, showing flaws should be seen as something negative, because it's not. Because everybody has them, and I think it's more negative to show somebody, like you said, who doesn't have flaws, or to show someone in an unrealistic way who perhaps hasn't even... I mean, if I see someone in a film who's perfect, as in they don't do anything wrong, they're, powerful, they're in a position where they can do anything they like, and they're still benevolent and lovely and all that kind of stuff, I don't believe that person exists.
Yeah.
There is nobody who has a perfect family life. There is nobody who has everything completely perfect. Everybody has flaws. And to show somebody like Christine, somebody who was clearly battling against some demons, but yet still had this intelligence and this power and this wit, that is positive. She was positive. And in a weird kind of twisted way, she was even, at least in the first half of the film, almost a role model in some ways.
And like I say, and it also, like I say, it's like we said at the start, it's one of the best depictions of somebody battling severe depression, and it humanizes depression in a really, really fantastic way as well. But while, it's taken its toll, and she maybe wasn't, but, she was a person at the end of the day. That's the main thing that comes out of it.
Yep. And I found myself liking her as a person too.
Yeah.
And wanting to know more about her.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's the first film in years that it actually had a main character like you genuinely felt invested in for the film. I can't recall in recent years another film like that. So.
I suppose we should talk about how Patty Chayefsky was inspired by Christine's story to make Network.
Yeah, because I think I've said this in conversations to you, Nathan, that when you watch the two of them, it's kind of weird. I think that this movie's like a kind of weird quasi-sequel to quasi-prequel, I would say, to Network.
Yep. I think that's a really good way to describe it.
Yeah, because a lot of the themes from this transfer, like this is the local news station, and then it transfers onto Network where it takes it like all the way. Like if all these things and, dealing with someone who's clearly not right and then who's got issues, and then pushing them all the way like that and putting them on display. I mean, but yeah, I think we're going to talk more about Network in a future show because it is that's I think that movie's had college theses written on it and all that. And it's like Lundy said in her Slenderman show. If you haven't seen it yet, just take the time to go out and watch it. It's an incredible piece of work, that movie.
And it's also big with conspiracy theorists. So there's some shared,
Yes.
there is some shared love there. So if you ever speak to a conspiracy theorist, have a word about that film, because that is something you can have a lot of common ground
and the
on.
line they're quoting out of that movie, and if you listen to her Slenderman show, I think Lundy explains it very clearly. Like there's so much irony in it. That's when a conspiracy theorist starts quoting Network, they're really not. It just shows you how unaware they are of what they're quoting there.
We were actually, the movie Network was assigned for us to watch in one of my journalism classes. So it's highly regarded in the industry as well.
And it kind of ranks alongside sort of 1984 in prophetic works of fiction that are still studied to this day. And you're still seeing the things that these books wrote about kind of happening in the world.
Yeah. I'm annoyed I missed that Slender Man one. I watched that film on the day, but unfortunately with my migraine I wasn't able to join in. But that was a good film. That was...
Yeah, it's another excellent piece. So, as I said, it seems to be with Nathan, we've kind of hit on this theme this month of, isolation and media and the kind of roles they play on folk.
Yeah.
Yep. And if you want to watch another movie that I personally see a lot of connection to with both Christine and Network, it's Taxi Driver.
Ah, yes. Taxi Driver.
And that one doesn't deal so much with the media, although the media there is the theme of media in that movie, but it's lesser played. It's
more kind of pop culture kind of thing. Well, at the time, 70s pop culture.
Mm-hmm. It does deal with political ads and that kind of thing. But it's about the pathology of loneliness and what it might be like to be completely isolated in a huge crowd of people, like in New York City, being surrounded by strangers every single night, driving a taxi in New York City and not being able to communicate or relate to anybody.
Talking about situational mental health as well, I mean, there's another really big De Niro film from back in the day, Deer Hunter, that deals with the problems that soldiers face when they came back from Vietnam. And that's another excellent film.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd probably say, if you watch Christine, you enjoy this and you enjoy a review of it. Like I said, I mentioned 13 Reasons Why is something that's kind of on a similar track to it. I mentioned Kevin Hines. He's got a great book, his book. And he's making a movie at the moment called Suicide, The Ripple Effect, which will be well worth watching. Another one to watch is The Bridge, which is a really haunting movie about the Golden Gate Bridge and the people who jump off it, because it's... I think it's one of the most notorious places in the States, Nathan, isn't it, for suicides?
Yeah. They actually have armed guards on the bridge now, guarding it day and night.
The Bridge it's a bizarre documentary because what it is, it's a lot of tourists and sightseers with their cameras, and they actually captured people jumping off it at the time. And that's the filmmakers base it around that and build up the story. They get the stories of the people they caught, and it's weird and unsettling to see people, but sometimes that's what's needed to drive that home. But that's definitely another one to watch. And I think that's my recommended watching and reading after this. I don't know if you guys have any.
Just a question: is it called the Golden Gate Bridge because people expect to end up at the Golden Gate at heaven?
I think it's
not sure. I'm pretty sure the bridge was named that before any suicides happened. I think that was the name as going in as it was built.
Is it the name of the channel it crosses into the bay?
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I think that's what it might be. I don't know if it was to do with the gold rush, and that's where all the boats would go to pick up their gold, and it's called the Golden Gate. I'm pretty sure in the comments section people are going to be correcting me as I speak.
I think I thought it was a little bit too. I thought it was a little bit too Alanis Morissette's definition of ironic.
All right, which is nowhere near the actual definition. Of ironic.
Yeah.
No, it's the Golden Gate Strait. That's what it is.
I see.
Just looked it up right now. So yeah, Jen, did you have any recommendations? Like if you kind of enjoyed Christine any further reading or
Well, it depends what
viewing.
aspects. I suppose it depends what aspects you're interested in.
Yeah.
In terms of films, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but in terms of its subject matter and suicidal ideation, I think it's very important to always bring up when these sorts of subjects have been broached that there are that, you know, if you are suffering from depression, if you are suffering from loneliness, there aren't just communities out there that are going to help you. There are also professional services that you can go and speak to. And from my personal experience of dealing with those particular organizations, the people who work there really do care. And that's one thing that you really have to get across to people, is that you're not just speaking to someone on the end of the phone whose job it is to be there for you. They're most of the time volunteers who've given up their own time because they really care and they really want to help you through it. So if you're feeling low and if you're feeling like you are nearing suicide, or there are some problems that you don't feel that you can discuss with anybody else in your local circle, reach out to someone like the Samaritans and speak to someone on their hotline. And those people really do care, and you can tell them anything, and it's both confidential and you know you're listening to somebody who has experience of dealing with these sorts of things, and they might have some ideas for you to help you sort out your life.
Yeah, Nathan,
Yeah, is that all we had?
So I was just going to say, yourself, do you have any further viewing or reading recommended after this movie?
Well, I already recommended Taxi Driver because it is my favorite film of all time, and there are actually some very similar themes running through it. Other than that, well, Jen also mentioned The Deer Hunter, which is another good one.
Great film.
Yep, one of my other favorites as well. And I think that's it as far as recommendations go.
Oh, well, I think with that we can wrap it up there.
All right, that was our show. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Trolling with Logic. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. If you love the show, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Supporting us at $5 or more per episode will get you access to exclusive, patron-only bonus content, early access to shows before everyone else, and other incentives. We are an amateur production, but with your patronage, we can help improve our audio quality and cover the costs for doing the show. We are grateful for anything you can pledge to the show. Go to www.patreon.com/trollingwithlogic to sign up if you are so inclined. We want to thank our 3 patrons who currently have chosen to support us. These patrons are Microbloganism, Josh at the Society for the Advancement of Science, and Avinash Kumar. Thank you very much for your support, which is helping us out. Thanks to you 3, we have now been able to hire a professional audio editor, so now you can all look forward to higher quality audio. If you have any suggestions for topics or guests you would like to hear on this show, let us know on Twitter or on our Facebook page. Thanks again for listening.
You
there was, the fact that this Christine was forced to basically forgo her professional integrity. And I think that's, as you've said, Nathan, that's something maybe a lot of people in media and journalism come face to face with at some point in their career.
Yeah, there's the problem of trying to stay true to your principles while also trying to meet the demands of ratings. And that creates cognitive dissonance and Christine's story kind of captures that perfectly with, she covered mainly human interest stories from the local community and kind of the she covered heartwarming local stories that had a human interest angle to it. And her boss was always pestering her to produce stuff that was grittier and that would raise the ratings. And he even used the famous line or the famous motto. It's not a motto. It's a dictum that if it bleeds, it leads. And she had ambitions to advance her career, and she understood that she had to move away from the kind of stories she was good at doing to meet the demands of her boss and the demands that come with being a broadcast news reporter these days for some reason.
He's in Singapore. That's partly to do with it. The time differences is all weird now with him.
Yeah, that explains it. Well, on this episode, we're reviewing a biographical drama movie called Christine. This film, which premiered at the 2016 Sundance Film Festival, is based on the true story of Christine Chubbuck, a 29-year-old broadcast news reporter who put a gun to her head and committed suicide on live television in July 1974. She was a reporter for WXLT TV, an ABC affiliate station in Sarasota, Florida. And the film we're talking about kind of chronicles her downward spiral and her eventual end. And the tagline that we use on the website for this show or part of the tagline is movie reviews to make your head explode. And now it's kind of getting a little bit too literal.
Yes, it is. It seems a bit in bad taste with this. Also to say, I think this is the first time we've ever reviewed a complete, like a standard movie on this show as such. Yeah, like just
a decent one. Like a properly decent
Yeah, but
one.
more like kind of a more kind of mainstream. Like a lot of the films we've reviewed in the past tend to be very obscure, maybe propaganda-ish, bad documents. So this is the first one that's actually proper mainstream.
There was definitely positive things about her. I mean, I liked her. I actually got to like her quite a lot. I mean, I related with her as well, but I also, from the very start of the film, she came across as strong, outspoken, not afraid to speak her mind and get her voice heard. She wasn't cowed by the guys around her as well, which at that time would have been quite difficult to, her voice was very much heard. She was passionate, she was strong, or at least outwardly she seemed that way. And she wasn't afraid to, tangle with the guys the men in her business who were the overlords as such.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Trolling with Logic, the podcast where we bring the hammer down on ignorance, unreason, and superstition on a bi-weekly basis with the occasional review of movies that are actually good. I'm your host, Nathan Dickey, and joining me as always is Cal.
Hi there, it's good to be here.
And Jen.
Hey, what's that?
Yeah, Kitch seems to be a rare and gritty, bloody stories are what sells.
And at the very beginning of the film as well, one of the lines that I picked up on was him berating her being a feminist, and that he thought that she thought that if she just shouted loud enough, she'd get what she wanted, which was quite kind of sexist in one way, but also authoritarian view of what she should be doing. He thought that because he'd invested in the news business, everything should go according to his whims. And yeah, it was a bit weird. I wouldn't want to work under somebody like that, but I actually do, kind of.
Right.
So.
But I think in most people's lives, they do come to a point with that with their professional lives where they're forced to, do you do the thing you're passionate about that maybe isn't going to get you as noticed as much, or do you forgo your principles to push ahead and like go for the more glamorous kind of work?
It all depends on what you want to get out of it in the end, doesn't it? If you want to get a good warm feeling of satisfaction that you've done something that you're proud of, then great. But unfortunately, as it was shown very well in this film, if you just go and do your own thing, do what you like, you probably just get left behind, or you might even get fired. You might lose your job because what you want to do isn't what they want to do. If you don't go with the flow, you get washed up on the bank. That's what it is.
Because there definitely was that, because the whole thing with Christine Chubbuck was she did suffer quite severe depression, streamful with legitimate actors, and it's been made to be a proper movie as such.
And it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was Lundy that switched me onto this, and then it was at the end of the show last week we switched it on, and it seems to have we're on a roll now reviewing movies kind of related to the subjects which are in this. I just want to say first off was technically this film is really good because it captures the mid-70s perfectly, like not just the costumes but the way the film's edited. It's it's paced just like an old 70s movie, because that's a problem I find with movies that are trying to capture a past decade. They seem to
Is it exactly as you remember it?
Not quite. But no, if you just say just go watch any movie from the 70s. Like the other night, I think Logan's Run was on TV, and that's, you notice the editing, it's a lot slower paced editing in 70s movies compared to today, where the cuts are just hyper fast all the time. And this one's done like that. And I think it's even the way they speak and just the whole atmosphere. It feels like it was actually captured on film and not on, a 4K camera. So I really applaud them for that. They captured the sort of mood and feeling of a 70s movie perfectly, which is ideal for this subject as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my technical take. And I suppose like the movie itself, it touches on quite a broad range of subjects, as you noted, Nathan. There's depression.